Section 16 of the Mentor 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Matthew Datcher. The Mentor 1 by Various. The Story of Coal, Volume 6, Number 6, Serial 154, May 1, 1918. By Charles Fitzhugh Tallman, editorial writer for The Scientific American. The Miner by Burton Braley. Grimy and caked with dust of coal he stands, grasping his pick within his mighty hands, the arbiter of destiny and fate, greater by far than king or potentate. Shops may not run except at his behest, at forge and blast his strength is manifest. The rolls that rumble and the shears that scream and all the million miracles of steam depend on him for fuel that will turn the wheels that urge them and the belts that churn. Guns that will shatter fortresses of steel, ships that will plow the waves on steady keel, bearing munitions for an army's need, must wait the miner's orders and take heed that he who toils within the coal mine's murk gives them the coal with which they do their work. Behind the men who battle in the trench there stands the workman at the lathe and bench. But back of them and master of them all the miner stands and holds the world in thrall. Not soon again shall any man forget how much the world is in the miner's debt. For we shall read upon fame's honor roll, he won the war, his labor gave us coal. Reprinted by courtesy of publishers of Coal Age. The Origin of Coal, 1. While the vegetable origin of coal is beyond question, two rival views are current among geologists to account for the deposit of ancient plant material in the form of coal beds, such as we now find in the earth. One school of geologists holds that the coal plants grew in great lagoons and swamps, like the mangrove swamps of today, and that the modern coal beds mark the locations of these swamps. From time to time, these areas subsided and were flooded with water to such a depth that the plants were killed. Eventually, the decayed vegetation of the former swamps was covered with a layer of mud or sand. Later, a slow upheaval of the ground brought these regions again to the surface. A new swamp formed, only to be submerged again at a later period, and the same process was repeated several times in the course of hundreds of thousands of years. The bulk of evidence seems to favor this view, but there is another. Perhaps the coal beds are not the sites of former swamps, but of estuaries and ocean shores where the plant material settled down in still water after a long drift down the ancient rivers from its place of origin. It is not impossible that both explanations are correct, some coal beds having been formed in one way and some in the other. With the progress of time, the deposits of sand were compacted into sandstone and the mud and clay into shale, while the layers of vegetation were solidified by pressure. Some of their constituents were vaporized and expelled by heat, and the final product was coal. The coal measures abound in fossil plants of species long ago extinct, and we also find the molds or casts of plants that have themselves disappeared, leaving only their impressions in the mud by which they were once enveloped. These records of ancient vegetation are mostly found in the rocks just above and below the coal beds, and not in the coal itself. The plants of the Carboniferous period, during which most but not all of the coal beds were formed, bore a family likeness to certain kinds of plants that flourish today. Many of them were ferns, ranging in size from the smallest species up to great tree ferns. Others resembled our modern horsetails or scouring rushes with their fluted and jointed stems, but these calamities, as the geologists call them, grew to the size of trees, sometimes 80 or 90 feet in height. Some plants of the Coal Age were like the modern cycads, intermediate in appearance between tree ferns and palms. Some were like the ginkgo, a tree with leaves like those of the maidenhair fern, widely introduced into this country from China and Japan. One of the commonest and largest trees was the lepidodendron, closely resembling, except in its vastly greater size, the club moss or ground pine, which we know so well as a Christmas decoration. The animal life of the period, of which also abundant fossil remains are found, include mollusks, fishes, crustaceans, insects, spiders, thousand legs, snails, reptiles, and lizards. Some of the insects were a foot or more in length. Of cockroaches alone, more than 500 species have been found in the coal measures. The Coal Fields of the United States. 2. When a coal famine is upon us, there is a grain of comfort in the reflection that beneath the soil of this country and within 3,000 feet of the surface, there still lies 3,538,554,000,000 tons of coal. This is the estimate of the United States Geological Survey. We have mined coal wastefully and used it prodigally, yet we have taken from the ground up to the present time only a fraction of 1% of the total amount at our disposal. The whole of our coal reserves, if they could be extracted and placed in a great cubical pile, would form a mass 8.4 miles long, 8.4 miles wide, and 8.4 miles high. If the coal thus far mined were piled up in the same way, the cube would be 7,200 feet long, 7,200 feet wide, and 7,200 feet high. The coal-producing areas of the country are divided into 6 great divisions, known as the Eastern Province, the Interior Province, the Gulf Province, the Northern Great Plains Province, the Rocky Mountain Province, and the Pacific Coast Province. The Eastern Province contains probably 9/10 of the high-rank coal of the country. It is made up of the anthracite regions of Pennsylvania and Rhode Island, the Atlantic Coast region of Virginia and North Carolina, and the Great Appalachian region, which embraces all of the bituminous and semi-bituminous coal of what is called the Appalachian Trough. The state of Pennsylvania produces 47% of all the coal mined in the country and nearly all of the anthracite. The Appalachian region is the greatest storehouse of high-rank coal in the United States, if not in the world. This nearby and almost inexhaustible supply of high-grade fuel, says the Geological Survey, has been the foundation of the development of the blast furnaces, the great iron and steel mills, and the countless manufacturing enterprises of the eastern states. The interior province includes all the bituminous coal fields and regions near the Great Lakes, in the Mississippi Valley, and in Texas, and is made up of 4 distinct sections: the northern, Michigan; eastern, Illinois, Indiana, and western Kentucky; western, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas; and southwestern, Texas. The coal of this province is not, in general, of as high quality as that of the eastern province, but it is very extensively mined and is used for heating and for generating power in the many cities and towns of the Mississippi Valley and the Great Lakes region. Indeed, extensive coal fields in proximity to rich agricultural lands have made possible the existence of such manufacturing centers as Chicago, St. Louis, and Kansas City, and have been a leading factor in the development of the vast railway systems of the Middle West. The Gulf Province is at present of little commercial importance. Its coal is mined only at a few places in Texas and is mostly lignite. The Northern Great Plains Province includes all the coal fields in the Great Plains east of the Front Ridge of the Rocky Mountains. The coals are of low rank, either being lignite or subbituminous, except in a few of the basins near the mountains. The largest coal region in this province is the Fort Union region, lying in the Dakotas, Montana, and Wyoming. The amount of unmined coal in this region is estimated to be twice as great as that lying in the rich Appalachian region, but it has been little worked, and it is generally of poor quality. The Rocky Mountain province contains a greater variety of coal than any other province in the United States. It includes all ranks from lignite to anthracite, but the prevailing ranks are subbituminous and low-grade bituminous. The coal of the Pacific Coast province is mined chiefly in the state of Washington, where it has aided in developing the industries of the Puget Sound region. Oregon and California have small fields, but the coal is of poor quality and little mining has been attempted. Handling coal. 3. In times gone by, coal was carried out of the mines on the shoulders of men and women, and then transferred in wheelbarrows to the sailing vessels or wagons in which it was taken to market. In progressive mines of today, the coal is loaded in the mine into small mine cars, which are then hauled and hoisted to the surface by electricity or steam. The mine cars are dumped on an elevated platform called the tipple, and the coal passes through chutes or conveyors to the railway cars waiting underneath to receive it. On its way downward, it undergoes a more or less elaborate process of screening, breaking, picking, washing, etc., according to the kind of coal and the purpose for which it is to be used. The coal reaches the market by 3 general methods of transportation. 1. All rail. 2. Rail to the seaports, where it is used for bunkering steamers or carried by vessel to other ports, foreign and domestic. 3. Rail to the Great Lakes, especially Lake Erie ports, from which it is carried to ports on the upper lakes, and from the latter again by rail to markets in the interior. The railroads themselves use about 1/4 of all the coal mined in this country. The coastwise coal-carrying trade is mainly by wooden barges towed by steamers, though much coal is also carried by schooners, some of which can carry a cargo of 5,000 tons or more. About 4% of the bituminous coal output goes to foreign countries. The consumption of coal, says the United States Geological Survey, is a measure of the industrial activity of a people, for as yet coal is the main source of mechanical energy. In this respect, the United States is the foremost nation, its average annual consumption of coal for all purposes being about 5 tons per capita. Prior to the present war in Europe, the consumption of coal per capita in England, Belgium, and Germany was about 4 tons, in Russia 1/4 of a ton, and in France about 1.6 tons. Marvelous forms of labor-saving machinery have been introduced to facilitate the loading and unloading of coal. The principal form of apparatus for transferring coal either to or from a vessel is the bridge tramway plant, which consists of long steel bridges mounted side by side on suitable rails so that they can be moved into place over the hatchway of a vessel. Huge buckets, which load and unload themselves, are carried on a trolley suspended from the bridge and transfer coal at high speed from the vessel to the stockpile or railway cars or vice versa. The cost of loading coal by this method is only a cent or 2 a ton. Another ingenious device is the car dumper. This powerful machine picks up bodily from the railway track a car loaded with 100 tons of coal, overturns it, and discharges its contents into the hold of a vessel, after which it returns the car to the track. It is capable of handling 50 cars an hour. It is equipped with special apparatus to prevent the coal from being discharged too violently and thus being badly broken up. Coal products. 4. The story of the coal products forms one of the most romantic chapters in the history of applied science. The marvels of fairyland are surpassed by the achievements of the modern manufacturer in obtaining from mere black rocks dug out of the ground not only heat and light, but a bewildering variety of useful gases, liquids and solids, drugs, chemicals, dyestuffs, and so forth. For hundreds of years, it has been known that when coal is covered or enclosed to keep out the air and then heated for a certain length of time, instead of burning to ash, it is converted into a porous, grayish-black substance called coke. This material, which burns without smoke or flame, is a valuable fuel for many purposes, especially for use in blast furnaces for the smelting of ore. Nowadays, coke is made on a vast scale from certain grades of bituminous and semi-bituminous coal. The coal is heated in coking ovens, of which there are several kinds. The most common form of an oven in this country is the beehive oven, which produces coke only. Another type of coking oven, more generally used in Europe than in America, is the flue oven, which produces, besides coke, a number of valuable byproducts. When coal is converted into coke, it gives off combustible gases. The idea of saving these gases and using them for illuminating purposes was first practically applied in the latter part of the 18th century. Coal gas is made by heating coal in a closed vessel called a retort. It is a mixture of hydrogen and methane, a compound of hydrogen and carbon, with small amounts of several other gases. Most of the carbon in the coal remains in the retort as coke, which is, therefore, a byproduct in the process of making coal gas. After the gas is given off from the coal, it passes through a series of vessels where, by chemical and other methods, it is freed from ingredients which would impair its value as an illuminant, but which are saved and used for other purposes. The most important of these are coal tar and ammoniacal liquor. The purified coal gas is finally conveyed to a gas holder or gasometer, from which it is distributed to the consumers. In recent times, other methods of gas making have come into use. In one of these, nearly all the carbon in the fuel is turned into a combustible gas by passing air through the hot coal. The product is known as producer gas and is very valuable for use as fuel and as a motive power in gas engines, but it is not an illuminant. A modification of this process, in which steam is passed over the heated fuel, gives a mixture of hydrogen and carbon monoxide known as water gas. This is also a valuable source of heat and power, but for use as an illuminant, it must be mixed with a gas made from oil. It is then known as carbureted water gas and is very extensively used for lighting purposes, either by itself or mixed with ordinary coal gas. Of the byproducts of gas making, ammoniacal liquor was, until recently, the only commercial source of ammonia. Coal tar, formerly thrown away as worthless, is today the source of innumerable substance of immense value to science and the industries. From coal tar are obtained benzene, toluene, xylene, phenol, carbolic acid, naphthalene, anthracene, etc. And these more direct products are combined with one another or with other chemicals to produce coloring matters, explosives, perfumes, flavoring materials, sweetening substances, disinfectants, medicines, photographic developers, in short, a little of everything. The total number of coal tar products runs into the thousands and is constantly being increased by fresh discoveries. In Germany, just before the war, the industries engaged in making these products, no longer byproducts, but far more important than coke and gas, were capitalized at $750 million. One firm made no less than 1,800 coal tar dyes, besides 120 pharmaceutical and photographic preparations. The smoke problem. 5. Smoking is a costly and injurious habit. This is not the beginning of an appeal on behalf of the anti-cigarette crusade, but the introduction to a few facts in regard to the far-reaching effects of smoky chimneys. The smoke nuisance is as old as the use of coal. In the 14th century, a man was executed in London for befouling the air of that city with the fumes of sea coal, as ordinary mineral coal was once called in England, because it was brought to London by sea. Under Queen Elizabeth, a law was passed forbidding the burning of coal while Parliament was in session, as the legislators believed their health was likely to be impaired by the smoky air of the city. What would these bygone gentlemen say if they could see modern London enveloped in one of its famous pea soup fogs, the color and denseness of which are entirely due to coal smoke? Smoke is injurious to health, destructive to vegetation, and fatal to architectural beauty. And along with all this, it is enormously expensive. In the first place, a smoky chimney means imperfect combustion and a waste of part of the heating value of fuel. Then, a smoky atmosphere entails big laundry and dry cleaning bills, frequent repainting of houses, injury to metalwork, damage to goods and shops, excessive artificial lighting in the daytime. Pittsburgh was once the most famous American example of all these evils, but it has recently reformed. Before the Mellon Institute of Industrial Research carried out its elaborate smoke investigation in that city and, in consequence, stringent smoke abatement ordinances were adopted, the annual smoke bill of Pittsburgh was estimated at nearly $10 million. The city was the paradise of the laundrymen, and light-colored clothing was so little worn by the inhabitants that it was known as the Morning Town. Throughout the United States, it is said that smoke causes an annual waste and damage amounting to $500 million. No wonder numerous societies have been formed to mitigate this evil, and a great many laws have been enacted on the subject. With a gradual increase in the use of gas, coke, and other smokeless fuels and improved methods of stoking furnaces, the smoke nuisance is now happily abating. The pollution of the air by smoke is the subject of systematic investigation and measurement at certain places in this country and abroad. Measurements of the soot fall made in Pittsburgh a few years ago indicated an annual average deposit of soot in that city amounting to 1,031 tons per square mile. London's average is 248 tons per square mile for the whole city and 426 tons in the central districts. In the heart of Glasgow, the annual soot fall is 820 tons per square mile. In Great Britain, there is a committee for the investigation of atmospheric pollution which has installed standard measuring apparatus in 16 English and Scotch towns. The soot is collected in a pollution gauge consisting of a large cast iron funnel enameled on the inside. Projecting above the gauge is a wire screen open at the top to prevent birds from settling on the edge of the vessel. The gauge communicates at the bottom with one or more bottles for collecting rainwater with its solid contents. The bottles are emptied once a month when their contents are weighed and analyzed. Smoke is injurious to the respiratory organs, conducive to eye strain, and responsible for lowering of human vitality. The gloominess of a smoke-laden atmosphere also has a depressing effect upon the minds of many people. Safety in coal mines. 6. Since the year 1870, some 60,000 men have lost their lives as a result of coal mining accidents in this country. This is approximately one fatality for every 180,000 tons of coal mined. Gradually, this bad record is being improved thanks to the combined efforts of the United States Bureau of Mines, the mining departments of the various states, the operators and miners themselves, but coal mining remains a hazardous pursuit. Falls of the roof are responsible for more accidents than any other single cause. These are likely to occur whenever the roof is not fully timbered, especially in the rooms where the coal is being blasted out. Many accidents also occur in mine shafts, notwithstanding the various safety devices with which the cage or elevator is nowadays provided. Fires and explosion attract a greater amount of public attention than other mining disasters on account of the large number of victims so often involved in a single occurrence of this kind. In the explosion at the Courier Colliery in France, March 10, 1906, more than 1,100 miners perished. This mine had previously been renowned for its freedom from accidents. Coal mine explosions are due to two principal causes, which may act either separately or in combination: fire damp and coal dust. Accumulations of fire damp or methane locked up in coal seams are liberated by the removal of the coal. Frequently, streams of this gas gush forth with a hissing noise and are known as blowers. Fire damp is explosive when combined with certain proportions of air. Apart from ventilation, which dilutes the gas below the danger limit, the principal precaution against explosives is the use of safety lamps so constructed that the gas cannot come into contact with a naked flame. An excessive amount of coal dust in the air of the mine may also give rise to explosions. Such explosions may be prevented by wetting the dust, moistening the air, or powdering the walls, roof, and floor with a non-explosive rock dust. After an explosion, the air of a mine contains a large amount of the deadly gas carbon monoxide, and this afterdamp, as it is called, makes rescue work extremely dangerous. Wherever suitable apparatus is available, the rescuers carry with them a supply of oxygen, by breathing which they are able to live for some hours in a poisonous atmosphere. The Bureau of Mines has established a number of rescue stations in the coal mining districts and maintains several mine safety cars for hurrying rescue crews to the scene of a disaster. The Bureau also instructs the miners in first aid and rescue work and is directing a national campaign in behalf of safety first in mines. Of the many methods that have been devised for testing the air of mines for noxious gases, none is more interesting than the use of caged canaries. These birds are much more susceptible than human beings to the effects of carbon monoxide and show signs of distress before a man begins to feel any discomfort from the gas. In many mines, they are carried in routine inspections. After an explosion, the number of rescuers equipped with oxygen apparatus is always limited. These form the advance guard and are followed by men without apparatus who carry canaries, by observing the behavior of which they can tell how far they may safely penetrate into the mine. The Bureau of Mines has devised a special form of cage in which the canary may be revived with oxygen after being overcome with gas. Experiments show that the bird may be asphyxiated and revived again and again without suffering any ill effects. Neither does he require an immunity to poisoning, which would make him a less reliable indicator. Were it possible for the lump of coal that we burn in our stove, grate, or furnace to tell its story, it would take us back millions of years to a time when the vast areas of the Earth's surface were covered with swamps, supporting a luxuriant vegetation. No human being, mammal, or bird yet existed. Animal life included fish, shellfish, and other aquatic species, besides reptiles and insects. The vegetal forms resembled our modern ferns, horsetails, club mosses, and evergreens. The atmosphere was heavily charged with moisture, and a mild climate prevailed even in the polar regions. Such were the conditions under which, during the great Carboniferous Age, most of the existing coal beds were deposited in earth. Coal is the litter of primeval swamps and forests. Year after year, the debris of the humid jungles accumulated in shallow water or in the boggy soil, where it underwent partial decay and was thus converted first of all into the slimy or spongy material known as peat. Similar deposits are in process of formation in the swamps of the present day, and the peat obtained from them is dried and used as fuel on an extensive scale in some parts of the world, especially Ireland, Holland, Germany, and Scandinavia. Gradual changes in the elevation of the land led to the submergence of the prehistoric peat bogs during successive intervals of time by lakes or shallow seas. Thus their vegetation was killed and they were overspread with layers of mud or sand, above which, during a subsequent period of elevation, a new peat bog would form, and this process was repeated several times. The conversion of the peat into coal appears to have resulted from the pressure of the overlying strata, probably aided by the internal heat of the earth. Much of its moisture was squeezed and evaporated out, the proportions of its component gases were reduced, and the result was a hard mineral, which has earned the popular name of black diamond because consisting chiefly of carbon, the same chemical element which, in a pure and crystalline form, constitutes the true diamond. Chemically, coal consists of carbon, the gases hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen, sulfur, and ash, the mineral matter that remains after combustion. The record of these long ago events is found when we sink a shaft through a typical coal-bearing strata. We pass through not one, but several layers of coal, which may vary in thickness from a fraction of an inch to 100 feet or more, and are separated by generally much thicker layers of sandstone or shale solidified clay. The layers of coal are known as coal beds. Unless a coal bed is at least 2 feet thick, it is hardly worth working, and, ordinarily, the thickness of a bed does not exceed 8 or 10 feet. The shale or sandstone above a bed is very commonly found to contain the remains or the impressions of the ancient plants from which the coal was formed. A study of these remains and casts has made it possible to classify hundreds of species of plants now extinct. Fragments of plants are also sometimes found in the coal itself, and thin slices of coal frequently show a vegetable structure under the microscope. Finally, to furnish conclusive proof of the vegetable origin of coal, we find under the coal bed a layer known as the underclay, which is a fossil soil filled with the roots and rootlets of the coal-producing plants. Different conditions of formation and also probably differences in the character of the original vegetation have resulted in the production of different kinds of coal. The most important heat-producing constituent in coal is the elementary substance called carbon, and the simplest classification of solid fuels depends upon the percentage of fixed, non-volatile carbon they contain. The average percentages running as follows: wood 50%, peat 55%, lignite 73%, bituminous coal 84%, anthracite coal 93%. When fuel is burned, the greater part of it unites chemically with the oxygen of the air to form certain invisible gases, especially carbon dioxide and water vapor, and only the ash remains. In the popular mind, coal is classified as hard or soft, while hard coal is further classified according to the size of the lumps. For both scientific and industrial purposes, more elaborate classifications are necessary, and several have been used or proposed. Kinds of coal. The United States Geological Survey classifies coal, first of all, according to rank, depending upon both chemical and physical characteristics. Anthracite, which contains the largest percentage of carbon, ranks highest, and lignite, with the smallest percentage of carbon, lowest. Coals of the same rank are said to be of high or low grade, according to whether they contain a relatively small or large percentage respectively, of ash and sulfur. The ranks recognized by the survey are anthracite, semi-anthracite, semi-bituminous, bituminous, subbituminous, and lignite. Anthracite is the hardest of coals. It was formed from bituminous coal under the crushing pressure due to the upheaval of mountains or by the intense heat of adjacent molten rocks. Most American anthracite is mined in eastern Pennsylvania. The largest deposits in the world are found in China. Anthracite burns slowly with little smoke. It is well adapted for domestic use on account of its cleanness, but it is not an economical fuel for steam raising or general manufacturing. Semi-anthracite also ranks as a hard coal, though it is less hard than anthracite. Very little is mined in this country, and it is generally sold as anthracite. Semi-bituminous coal is a softer coal, which when burned properly gives off but little smoke. The best semi-bituminous coal ranks highest among the coals in heating value. It is the most valuable fuel for manufacturing purposes, also for steamships, as it requires less bunker space per unit of heat than any other coal. Bituminous coal or ordinary soft coal burns readily with a smoky flame and is the most commonly used for manufacturing purposes. In fact, the bulk of the coal mined throughout the world belongs to this rank. It includes a good many varieties, some of which are extensively used in making coke, while others, such as cannel coal, have been in great demand for use in gasworks. Nowadays, however, the widespread introduction of water gas, which does not require any particular kind of coal, has diminished the demand for gas coals. Subbituminous coal, or black lignite, is common in some parts of our western coal fields. It is a clean and useful domestic fuel when used near the mines, but it is not very satisfactory for shipment as it shrinks and crumbles under the effects of weathering and is liable to spontaneous combustion. Lignite is the least valuable of coals and is the form of coal which is the least altered from the original peat. The Geological Survey applies this name only to those coals which are distinctly brown and either markedly woody or clay-like in appearance. Lignite, as it comes from the mine, contains from 30 to 40% of moisture, and it slacks or falls to pieces much more rapidly than subbituminous coal when exposed to the air. It is hardly suitable for transportation. For commercial purposes, coal is also classified according to size. The coal as it comes out of the mine without any sorting into sizes is known as run-of-mine, and the semi-bituminous coals are commonly shipped in this form. Most coals, however, are passed over bars or gratings, which constitute screens of different degrees of fineness. Each screen permits all the lumps below a certain size to fall through, and thus the coal is divided into the different standard sizes. The sizes of anthracite from the smallest to the largest are rice, buckwheat, pea, chestnut or nut, stove, egg, broken or grate, steamboat, and lump. Bituminous coal is divided into slack, nut, and lump, the largest size. A mixture of lump and nut is called three-quarter coal. The modern history of coal. The age of the steam engine is also the age in which the use of coal has become widespread, and the output of coal is a faithful index of industrial progress. Although the Greek writer Theophrastus, about 300 BC, mentions the use of coal as a fuel, and its use was also known to the ancient Britons and the Chinese, it was virtually unknown throughout the Middle Ages. The first record of coal mining in England is of the year 1180 AD, and the coal was first shipped to London in the year 1240. It was long known as stone coal, pit coal, etc., to distinguish it from charcoal, also as sea coal, on account of being carried to London by sea. Bituminous coal was first mined in America in 1750 near Richmond, Virginia. Anthracite was discovered in Rhode Island in 1760 and in Pennsylvania in 1766, but for many years its value was not recognized. As late as the year 1812, Colonel George Shoemaker of Pottsville was treated as an impostor and threatened with arrest for attempting to sell a few wagon loads of anthracite in Philadelphia. Methods of burning it were not understood, and it was declared to be merely black stone. In the year 1820, only 365 tons of anthracite were sold in this country, as compared with the present annual output of about 90 million tons. Before the days of the railway, coal was shipped mostly by water in rough boats called arks, which floated down the rivers to the seaboard towns. As it was impossible to return against the current, the ark was sold with the coal at its destination. A great many arks were wrecked in transit, and the whole process of transportation was a costly one. Only with the introduction of steamboats, canals, and railways did the coal industry assume serious proportions. The production of coal in America has grown at an amazing rate. In the year 1868, Great Britain produced 3.6 times as much coal as the United States, and the output was also exceeded by that of Germany. In 1899, the United States took the lead. At the present time, with an estimated production for the year 1917, 643,600,000 tons, the United States is producing nearly half of all the coal mined in the world. Great Britain ranks second, closely followed by Germany. How coal is mined. A relatively small amount of coal is quarried near the surface of the ground from open pits. The overlying soil is removed by steam shovels, and the coal is then blasted out and shoveled into cars. Most coal is mined underground. Access to the coal beds is obtained either by sinking a vertical shaft or by driving a tunnel, according to the location of the beds. A tunnel driven at a steep angle is called a slope. A horizontal tunnel leading into a coal seam is called a drift. In this country, few coal mines are more than 300 or 400 feet below the surface, and the deepest is about 1,600 feet. Much deeper mines are found in Europe, especially in Belgium. American mine shafts are generally rectangular and are divided into 2 or more compartments. Where a shaft passes through water-bearing strata, it must be provided with a tight lining or tubing to prevent the mine from being flooded. All water that enters the mine collects in an excavation or sump at the bottom of the shaft and must be pumped to the surface. The method of working coal seams most commonly practiced in this country is known as the room and pillar system. One or more tunnels or entries are first driven from the bottom of the shaft or mouth of the drift. These are the main thoroughfares of the mine and are usually provided with tracks over which the mine cars are hauled by mules or by some other method of traction, locomotives, endless chains, etc. Secondary entries, headings, butt entries, etc. branch off from the main entries. Finally, the work of extracting the coal consists of excavating open spaces or rooms adjoining the entries. The actual mining is done in the rooms, and different methods are in use. Anthracite is generally shot from the solid, that is, blasted out from the face of the coal without any preliminary cutting. This method is objectionable, especially in bituminous mines, where it is, however, much practiced, because the large charges of powder requires to produce a great deal of coal dust and weaken the roof and pillars, often leading to falls of coal and fatal accidents. A better plan consists of undercutting the coal before it is blasted out. A long groove is made at the level of the floor, either with a pick or with a coal-cutting machine. Holes are then drilled some distance above the groove for the insertion of the blasting charges, and the coal is blasted down. A single shot will sometimes dislodge a ton or two of coal. The next step is to shovel the coal from the floor into a mine car, which is then pushed into the adjacent entry. The miner attaches a numbered tag to the car so that he will be duly credited for his work, which is paid for by the ton. The loaded cars are eventually hoisted or hauled out of the mine to be weighed and discharged above ground. The final step in working a coal seam by the room and pillar method is to mine out the thick walls or pillars of coal, which are originally left between adjacent rooms to support the roof. As this work proceeds, the worked out sections are filled with waste rock, or the roof is allowed to fall. The object is to leave as little coal in the mine as possible, but practically it is rare that more than 60 or 70% is recovered. One feature of a coal mine that must be carefully planned is the system of ventilation. This is provided not merely for the comfort of the miners, but to prevent, as far as possible, the accumulation of poisonous and explosive gases. There are always at least 2 airways leading into the mine, one or both of which may also be used for hoisting or other purposes, known as the upcast and the downcast, according to the direction in which the air passes through them. A current of air is maintained either by keeping a fire burning at the bottom of the upcast or by the use of powerful fans or blowers. A system of tight trap doors prevents the air from taking a shortcut between the downcast and the upcast, and thus leaving the greater part of the mine unventilated. The coal in the mine constantly gives off various gases, one of which, the notorious fire damp, methane or marsh gas, is responsible for many explosions. In recent years, it has been discovered that coal dust itself, when mixed with the right proportion of air, is violently explosive. Mine explosions may be minimized by requiring the use of safety lamps, oil, gasoline, or electric, by providing devices to prevent sparking in electrical apparatus, and by using for blasting operations only so-called permissible explosives, which give a shorter and cooler flame than black powder. Coal dust explosions can be largely prevented by wetting the walls of the mine or by the new process of rock dusting, which consists of applying dry, incombustible powdered rock to all surfaces. Unfortunately, none of these precautions are employed as generally as they should be. The elevator used for hoisting in the mine shaft is called a cage. After the mine cars reach the surface, they pass upon an elevated structure called the tipple. This is generally the most conspicuous feature of a mining property above ground and provides facilities for screening and otherwise preparing the coal as it passes down chutes to the railway cars underneath. The more elaborate structure used for anthracite is called a breaker. It includes machinery for crushing the coal and arrangements for removing slate and other waste rock by hand picking or otherwise. Coal mining in this country gives employment to an army of 765,000 men. The word army has a sinister appropriateness in this connection, since out of every 1,000 men employed in the industry, 3 are killed and 180 injured annually. The world's coal resources. In order of output, the leading coal-producing countries of the world are United States, Great Britain, Germany, Austria-Hungary, France, Russia, Belgium, Japan, China, India, and Canada. The total production during the latest year for which data are available was about 1,346,000,000 tons. How long will the world's coal supply last? This is a question to which various answers have been given. Geologists are able to furnish a rough estimate of the amount of coal now in the ground and near enough to the surface to be mined. But with the growth of the world's industries, the demand for coal is increasing by leaps and bounds, and nobody can safely predict how much will be needed at any future time. The world's coal reserves, that is, the amount of coal remaining unmined, are estimated at 8,154,322,500,000 tons. In the United States, it is estimated that we have used only 4/10 of 1% of our available coal supply. At the present rate of consumption, the coal in this country would last about 4,000 years. But if the present rate of increase in consumption should be maintained, it would only last 100 years. Fortunately for posterity, there are sources of heat, light, and power which are not, like the fuels, exhaustible. Water power, for example, is a permanent asset, and there are other inexhaustible sources of energy, such as solar heat and the internal heat of the earth, which man's ingenuity will someday turn to good account.